Jessica and Liz, I am so excited for this conversation. I feel like it's so overdue. And you both are leaders that I have such respect for and excited for our conversation today. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us. I want to interview you is what I want to do. So that's going to be my temptation during our conversation.
Well, flip it around, but if we can always do a part two if we decide we want to do that. It's been, for our listeners, Jessica and I have known each other for a number of years. I think we first connected at an If Gathering event, I'm going to guess. Mm-hmm. And you're one of those people that I just feel like we'd be fast friends if we were in the same place frequently enough. So
Absolutely.
The listeners are just going to get an opportunity to kind of hear us catch up on all things life. And yes. Liz, I got to interview you after your book came out a couple years ago.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember?
Right. I do.
I don't remember exactly when it was, but your book was newly out and we did a quick podcast interview, but we haven't met in person. So we still have our only virtual friends.
That we would also be fast friends.
Okay. The three of us together.
I want to be in the club. I want to be in the fast friend club.
I was going to say, I have so many relationships like that now that I'm like, oh, there are so many people that I'm grateful for virtual connections and the opportunities to do this kind of work together. But I'm like, put us in the same room and I'm pretty sure something magical will happen if we were all in the same place. So
magic or mischief, but they both in my book.
It's so great. It's so great. Okay. I would love for each of you to take a minute and give the listeners just a little bit of a background. You both are extraordinary entrepreneurs. You've launched and grown your own businesses. What we're going to dig into today is that you recently merged your companies. And so I'm really fascinated about that. But first, I'd love for you each to just take a minute and give us the backstory on Noonday Collection, on Sseko Designs. Like, tell us about your companies and a little bit about yourself. So you can pick who goes first, but I want to give everybody the backstory.
Okay. Liz tagged me. So I started Noonday Collection around 12 years ago. It started as a fundraiser to adopt our son from Rwanda. And it was twofold. How can I get enough money to complete the adoption of my son when the housing recession hit? And I was a realtor and home flipper, which was not the industry you wanted to be in at the time. And secondly, how could I create economic opportunity for those living in vulnerable places? I had spent time living overseas in my early 20s, and I had always noticed that what helped people emerge out of poverty was entrepreneurship. It was a good job. And so how could I do both of those things? And I opened my home up one night to all my friends to shop artisan made goods. So some vulnerable people living in Uganda that were extremely talented. My friends said they could be the future leaders of Uganda if they just had a marketplace. And then I needed money to complete the adoption of my son. So we both solved each other's problems that night. Women came, they shopped, they loved it. And that is what launched Noonday Collection. And so now we work with 30 different artisan businesses around the world, over 2,500 artisan partners. And we've helped fund $1 million of adoptions and families here in America.
Amazing. Yeah, that's fascinating. I don't think I knew the genesis of that story. So that's super fascinating. I love that so much. Liz, how about you?
I do just want to say, Jess, my new dream is that the next podcast that we do, someone asks me to impersonate you and you to impersonate me. And I would love to know how down to the actual words we could do each other's stories. I feel like we're ready for that. We're ready. Months into the merge. I feel like Jess and I joke that part of the, not to spoiler alert for the rest of the episode, but one of the beautiful gifts of this merger, we joke that we get to be each other's stunt doubles. Like,
I love it.
I can't be there. Can you? And feeling like there's actually somebody who we can kind of rely on for this very specific role that we've both played in our communities. So I feel like that would be the end of that would be our final test, Jess. It's can you actually get up on stage or on a podcast and impersonate the other person?
Okay. Challenge taken. We're going to do it. But I will just have to say, I was talking to a friend the other day who's a very well-known author, speaker, and she's been in the middle of a book tour and she was driving home and she had a huge weekend that weekend. It happened to be that they had scheduled a massive fundraising weekend. The weekend she was right in the middle of her book launch. And I literally was like, oh my gosh, I wish you had a stunt double like I do. because I have a stunt double now.
You do.
You know,
That's
I
so
really do.
fantastic.
I mean, we can change. We give each other stage presence. You know, we're not fighting for the limelight, is what I'm saying. We truly are like, oh my gosh, we can elevate one another, our message, our community, our social impact, and it is so powerful. So I highly recommend a stunt double.
Find
I
yourself a
love it.
Stunt-Double. That is our
There we
primary,
go. Episode done.
primary advice around mergers and acquisitions is just you go get yourself a Stunt-Double.
Maybe that's our book, Liz. Maybe that's our book.
I love that.
Find yourself a stunt double.
That's so
Collaboration
good.
over competition. Look, it even has the
So
You even have your tagline.
title.
Yep, your subtitle. That's perfect. Okay,
So,
Liz,
Jenni,
give
I
us
know
your
I just
story.
I just totally derailed you. So my
Good.
story is that I moved to Uganda after graduating with a master's degree in journalism, just really curious about what are the issues women and girls living in extreme poverty and in conflict and post-conflict zones. What are they facing? What does life look like? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? And frankly, with a desire just to build community and friendship, because I was in a season of life where I had a lot of quote unquote passion, which was really actually just an intellectual understanding and opinions about issues facing women and girls in extreme poverty. But my life, my friends, my community, none of it was actually impacted by that. So it was kind of a twofold goal to pursue journalism and, cover humanitarian rights issues and also just make friends and build this community. And so I showed up in Uganda. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a, reason other than those two kind of curiosity led dreams to be there. And I ended up meeting a group of girls in between high school and university that were super academically gifted, but came from backgrounds of extreme poverty. And so there's a 9-month gap in Uganda between high school and university. And so these girls were testing into college, but then going back home during their gap year and facing a ton of social pressure to get married, to drop out of school, and to not continue their academic journeys, even though they were very qualified to do so. And so I kind of just started dreaming about like, how can we bridge this gap? How can we create community and social support and financial support so that these young women can continue their educational journeys and become leaders in Uganda and East Africa and the continent and our world. And so long story short, I designed a pair of kind of strappy, funky sandals, zero interest in fashion. It was very much so like, I don't care. I mean, I tried to start a chicken farm and that failed. And I was like, I don't know, let's try these sandals. And hired 3 young women, Mary, Mercy, and Rebecca, and basically made a promise to them. I was like, hey, if you make these sandals for the next 9 months, I'll try to sell them in the US and you'll go to college next year.
Wow.
And they were like, okay. And I was like, all right.
Why not?
Came back home and started slinging strappy sandals. And then one thing led to another. It worked. I mean, it wasn't like, whoa, everything's working. I worked for all of it. It was hard. It was challenging. But it worked. People bought the sandals. They loved the story. And then from there, we really just grew with a vision of let's grow our product line. Let's build a best in class manufacturing center and brand that enables people to buy beautiful products that are very design and product forward, but that have a beautiful story of impact and hope in mind. And that's what we've been doing ever since.
I love that so much. Why sandals? What was the...
Literally, Jenni, when I was in college, I did not like fashion. I was just like super crunchy. I had like 2 pairs of pants and I thought that was like kind of excessive. And I was walking to a chemistry lab one morning at like 8:00 in the morning in my cheapo rubber flip-flops. And they were so loud. And it was a long walk and they were just very floppy. And so I was
love it.
I want a pair of flip-flops that don't flop. So I came back home to my dorm room and I basically took those rubber like shower sandals essentially. I kind of tore them up and I replaced the rubber kind of thong piece with some ribbon and kind of strapped them to my feet.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, here we go. Flip-flops.
There we go.
Don't flop. They were ugly as sin. I mean, they were ugly as sin, but I was like, but they don't flop. And
but they don't flop.
Where people would ask me about them. They're like, it was like this really bright kind of rainbow colored ribbon. And so some girls on my college campus were like, those are so cute. Where did you get them? And I was like, haha, that's funny. I made them in my dorm room. And I even had people ask me like, will you make me a pair? And I was like, no, make your own sandals. Now, fast forward 10 years later, I'm like, no, please
Yep.
buy all
Please
of these
buy these
from me.
sandals.
Exactly.
Please buy all the sandals.
And it was just, when I was in East Africa, it was just like, let's do a nonprofit. And then I was like, no, I want it to be sustainable and business and job creation. And it was like, okay, chickens, agriculture, tested that out. So it wasn't led out of, I have a dream to start a fashion brand. It was like,
you responded to a need.
Totally. And just like, I don't know, the only other thing I've made before is like these kind of fugly, strappy sandals, which are not fugly anymore. They're now
They're not. They're fantastic
and sophisticated. But it really was, it started out as just a means to an end. And like, I don't know, try sandals, see if we can make a little cash money from these sandals.
I love it. How long ago was that you hired those 3 girls to start making sandals?
That was in 2009.
2009. So fascinating.
Kind of past the decade mark.
Yeah. Because your businesses are similar in age. Yes. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is so fascinating to think of. Did you guys know each other then? When did the 2 of you first connect?
I don't know how we did not know each other then, like during sort of origin story and inception. But after that original gathering at my house where a bunch of women came, and this was the beginning of Noonday Collection, I knew I needed to sell a broader range of products than just, paper bead jewelry from Uganda. So I immediately started, searching the internet, asking friends. And so Sseko is the brand that came up for me. And I actually was kind of their first Noonday ambassador by selling their sandals at my trunk shows. And I still have beautiful photographs of these sandals. In fact, I guess I don't think I can say what's coming in the spring, but let's just say that I have beautiful photography from these sandals. And so, but we didn't really get to know each other then. It was really my business partner was talking with her business partner to just do the, purchase of the goods.
Yeah.
But I don't know. When did we first meet? I can't even recall when we met.
We knew. So it was like, so you became a customer. You were like a wholesale customer for us. So we knew of each other in the earliest days. But I don't think I started becoming aware of like you as a person until maybe like 5-ish years later. But then even still, it was kind of just like internet-ish acquaintances.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I remember now. No, now I remember. I was in Oregon. I was in Portland for an event. And it was a Noonday Collection event. And I think I reached out and said, let's go to breakfast. And we went to some Cuban spot. Do you remember this?
I was on maternity leave. I had my firstborn. So that was 6. That's easy to place when you have kids. So it was 6 years ago because Theo was a baby and I was on maternity leave with him. And we went up and got Cuban.
That's so great. That's so great. I just love how you're, both of you are pursuing just kind of accidentally, a passion that kind of fuels into these businesses and then just take off. I mean, both of your companies just exploded, at least from my seat, watching from, a bit from afar, just seeing the work that you were doing and how you guys were building these businesses and doing so much good in the world as you were doing it. So fast forward, you guys just went through a merger this year. Merged these 2 businesses together, which I think every leader listening is like, how do we do this? I think different, companies and businesses entertain the idea, but it's really daunting and a little overwhelming. So, and you guys were kind of competitors. So. What'd you say, Liz?
I said rightfully so. I'm not going to tell people it's not a big deal. I mean, obviously very pro, but woo-wee, it's a lot.
Well, and I love that you're saying that because I want to get into that too, because I think that's the thing that you guys have been through so many different stages of leadership, in your journeys, which if we had hours, I'd be asking all the questions because every stage of growth comes with risk and sacrifice and facing your fears. And you guys have both just done such a remarkable job of figuring out what do I need to continue to succeed and accomplish this mission. And so from my seat, from watching out here, I see so much of that present, but I know that it doesn't come without challenges and sacrifices. So talk a bit about how did the conversation even start about merging your companies? And then just start to give us a little insight into that process, what that's been like for you guys.
Well, post COVID, I know so many of us were still in a challenging time, but the communities that we partner with, I mean, multiply your challenge by a million. 150 million people were pushed back into global poverty, and 20 million girls left the classroom, many of them never to return again. So we found ourselves, wanting to continue to create economic opportunity for those communities that we had been working in for years that are truly facing so many setbacks, like the war in Ukraine. Wheat prices is really impacting East Africa. Haiti, it's in the middle of basically a coup, a takeover. Afghanistan. I mean, we have artisans in Afghanistan, the border of Myanmar and Thailand. We work with communities there. I mean, these are places that are facing incredible, insurmountable odds is what it can feel like. And so how can we continue to stand in solidarity with them? And it really created a conversation of how can we grow? What will it look like for us to grow in this environment? And I gave Liz a call. I texted her and said, "Hey, Liz, what does it look like for us to start going together?" And really did not know what that would look like, because you don't know what's going on under the hood of other people's cars until you open up the hood. And, so we started that conversation, and the further we went along in that conversation, it just made more sense from an infrastructure standpoint, from a technology standpoint, from a financial standpoint for Sseko to join forces under Noonday Collection. And so that began a really intense process of negotiations, of really letting go of identity for both of us. I mean, I think we realize, there's grief no matter what, no matter if, you are going to another company to merge under them or whether they are coming under your brand. It is loss. I mean, there's loss of identity, turf. There's really like identifying, gosh, where's my ego alive and active? Am I willing to share my power and really practice what I preach? So those are some of the questions and problems and conversations that we've been in over the last few months. But we launched August 1st together as one community, as one product line. And as you heard in the beginning, we now are each other's stunt doubles. And I could have never expected this. I never would have imagined this scenario. And yet it's more beautiful than it's beyond what I ever could have dreamed. And having another female founder to work alongside and, it's because it's really unique what we do. We lead female entrepreneurs. We really are advocates for social justice in the world. We care about fashion and sustainability. It's just a very interesting intersection of so many things. And so to find someone else that's also just as passionate about this very interesting intersection is so much fun. You realize you're not a special snowflake in the world.
In the best way. Like, you are not unique. You have a stunt double out there. So find her or him and go at it together. I do, not to make it too like preachy, lessons learned from the, trenches of the M&A. But I mean, for me, one of the core takeaways is what if we the only reason this worked, I mean, our lawyers were like, because of just kind of the schedule and the fashion cycle and with our field and all of these things, we kind of had this window where it was like, if it's going to happen, it has to happen to do it in like 90 days, or it might not be able to happen, or it would happen a long time. There was just all of these things. We were like, if we're going to pull this off, we have to go at like breakneck speed. And our lawyers were like, we've never seen a deal get done this fast. And we did it. And I deeply believe, kind of, we're both followers of a thought leader named Andy Crouch. And I think maybe he came up with the term. I'm not sure, but the language that we've been using is kind of this like canopy of trust that we had built without even actually knowing it, and not intentionally. And so one of the things that I take away from this is like, okay, well, Jess started out as my customer, and then she was technically a competitor, and just like, we need to be walking around in the world. You never know what customer, what client, what competitor is going to end up being your work wife, your business partner. or your stunt double, and just treating those relationships with care and with respect and with, like this sense of, hey, my success doesn't have to come at the cost of yours. And it's so natural, right? When you're running
of course.
competitors, we're always going to look to the left and to the right.
And I even had people tell me, like, because we've talked over the years, and I even had someone, someone on our team, and I'm like, oh, I was talking to Liz, and this person was like, I don't understand why you're talking to her. Like, what are you doing on the phone with her? And I just
don't give
remember
away our
thinking,
secrets, or
I remember just thinking, because we're doing things differently. That's what we're doing. I mean, we're both part of the Fair Trade Federation, and Fair Trade, it does things radically different than traditional retail, that guards all of their sources, that pays their people, 30, 90-day net after receipt of product. And that also is super unique. And that we're like, yeah, here's the people that we source from. Here's how it's made. It's just transparency and collaboration through every single step of the way in our business. And that's including in our relationship too. And it always has been that way. It wasn't suddenly like, oh my gosh, I'm calling Liz, and I was able to call her or text her easily that day because I had been in relationship.
Already relationship. And already, like, I love that phrase, the canopy of trust, but you had already been building that. It sounds like just in the nature of your relationship and engagement over the years. I love, Liz, what you said there too, about you just never know, like, as you're networking and connecting, and, you just never know what those relationships might lead to, which is really powerful.
And Jess, we've never talked about this explicitly, but I'm making an assumption I feel 99.9% confident making. Another thing is, I always took so we're each other's biggest competitors. We have a similar opportunity, a similar community, and a similar product catalog and kind of mission. There's nuance and differences, sure. But we just constantly I would be, doing coffee dates with brand new folks to our sales field, and they would be like, oh, I was at Noonday and now I'm at Sseko. And I know that there were people that left Sseko and went to Noonday. And it would be so easy. Your gut, right, is to want to be like, let me tell you why we're better. And let me just, maybe make these like subtle digs about like, oh, well, they do things this way, of just kind of, well, they're my competition and I want more people to come to Sseko. And I very much so took great care throughout the years to never do that. And it was like, oh my gosh, like, when I would have a coffee date with someone, they're like, I was at Noonday, and oh my gosh, I love Noonday. I love what they're up to. Jessen is an amazing leader, which one, I definitely remember a few conversations where I could feel the surprise, people being like, oh, why are you talking so positively about, and just being like, we share so much more in common than we are apart. And I'm not doing that at the time for any reason other than I want to live out these beliefs that there's enough for all of us to succeed. And I want Jess Honegger and Noonday to flourish more than I want Sheen to flourish, more than I want Forever 21 to flourish. It's like we're on the same team. And so it's like what she's building in the world is actually really similar to what I want to build in the world. And so I want her to be successful because that's the world I want to live in. But fast forward, 5 years later, it's like, well, I'm really glad I didn't spend the last 5 years kind of like seeding low key, bad vibes over to Noonday and Jessica, because that would have made my job of bringing my entire sales field over to this company a heck of a lot harder. But luckily for years, I had been like, I love this company. I love these folks. I love what they're doing in the world, which I think was also the reason that this merger could be successful, because I think our field felt that mutual respect that we had offered one another as competitors over the years. So it wasn't like, oh, all of a sudden
we didn't have to fake it. Yeah, we didn't have to fake it.
Yeah, you didn't have to like spin the story of like, oh yeah, no, we're big fans of each other. Liz, Lynn
and I are such non-spinners. Like, we're so authentic. It's like, I mean, we can sell water to a drowning man, but we have to believe. I mean, we have to believe. So yeah,
guys, that abundance mentality is so powerful, but I think so often leaders lean to the scarcity, right? They lean to there's not enough. I've got to protect my territory. I mean, I noticed this with myself, with other coaching companies. It's like, well, and you're trying to identify those differentiators of why like working with foresight is so much better than working with this one over here. And you notice yourself going to that. And I had another competitor of mine at one point early in my journey, which I think was just a gift, that they said this to me, but they said, Jenni, you know what? I'm going to coach somebody for a season, and I'm going to have poured out and into that person or that leader. And then you're going to coach them because you're going to have something different you can offer them. And they're going to need us both at different points in their journey. And that really helped, because I just battle scarcity. I can find all kinds of good, reasons why that's part of my story and journey. But, so it's like I'm present to that and aware of it. But like having the people in my life who were quick to identify that and remind me of the importance of abundance and generosity and the desire to champion and support one another. So I just love that about your story and the commitment that you both made. Because is it fair to say you've probably had your moments of like scarcity?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean,
or you wouldn't be human, but right.
Yeah. But I do remember reading, it was like a quote by Jeff Bezos of all people, where it's just radically focusing on what you're building and on your customer. And I think when you really don't look to the right or to the left, and that is what really can alleviate some of that tendency that we have, especially if we're going through a hard time. It's so easy to kind of, oh, what are they doing that's working? And also we make so many assumptions, about, oh, I bet they're just absolutely crushing it. And it's so refreshing to me. I talked to a friend the other day who's like, hey, Jessica, like no one has a playbook right now, and I like Chip and Joanna Gaines. They just got on Instagram from their warehouse and they were like, we have so much inventory and we're doing a 75% off sale because we did not sell what we thought we were going to sell, and I find that to be so refreshing because we all are in this together and people need to see behind the curtain. People want to see behind the curtain. I feel like that's what people are craving anyway. Yeah. And, I feel like that's really refreshing. So I think being able to be vulnerable and live authentically, and then really choosing to build what you're meant to build, and knowing that you do bring something unique, like you do bring something special to the table, and it is completely different than what the other person is bringing to the table because you're not the same people. So it is going to be different.
Yeah. And there's room for both of those things.
But I appreciate your perspective on that, Jenni. And because I do want to clarify, at least for myself, my natural tendency is scarcity for sure. Like and this is the difference. And I think it's super important for leaders to understand, right? We have our reaction and then we have our response. That's good. The more evolved of a leader we are, the more we are able to pause between reaction and response. But my kind of general thought is like, maybe over time you can change your reaction. But I actually, and when I say reaction, what I mean is your initial gut instinct of like your body is reacting in a specific way, and a story from your childhood or from your upbringing or some wound that you have is causing you to like react to this thing in the moment. And I think over the last couple of years, I used to really beat myself up for my reaction to things. So in this scenario, let's take scarcity versus abundance. Oh man, my reaction's always scarcity. I want to be an abundance person. And I wish I didn't have that initial reaction to that thing. And I've honestly kind of just given up on that and been like, your reaction is your reaction. Like, let it be, but you get to choose control of your response.
That's good.
So if I can build the muscle memory in myself to go, my heart's starting to beat kind of fast. I'm noticing that my face is flushing. My stomach is tightening up. You're feeling afraid. You're feeling scared. You're feeling competitive. Okay. Give it a moment. That's okay. That's a natural thing. Take a beat and then tap into your frontal cortex, which is going to tell you something different, which is going to say enough to go around and play the long game. And your worthiness isn't in your success. And you don't know what potential, might come out of this, all of these things.
Well, yeah. And I think the more you do, the more you pay attention to that reaction and are actually compassionate to that part of you. And you're able to identify, when did I first feel that? How old is this feeling? How old is this thought? And then it really enables you to be compassionate to that part of you and realize that's not all of me. Not all of me is scarcity. Not all of me is anxious. Not all of me is fear. There's another part of me that really believes and has a lot of faith and is optimistic and knows that it's all going to be okay. Like all those parts sit at the table. It's just, we really want the part that's faith driven to be in charge, to be the one, serving the food at the table. And you've got to notice and not stuff it and not beat it, but say, oh man, I see you. And you know what? I'm going to let my faith-filled part come and get and look into your eyes and say, it's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. Yeah,
that's really good. That's really good. Okay, let me ask you this question. Back to the merger stuff, which all of that was really, really great. You guys, both brands were pretty distinct, right? Like, and so I'm making an assumption. So I'm, looking from the outside in, but both of your brands, I feel like you guys were pretty distinct in your brand and probably pretty distinct in the culture of your team. In the ambassadors that that you recruited, like in the work that you did. So I want to know, how did you merge those cultures? Right? Like, so it sounds like there are a lot of value similarities between, you guys have rattled off a lot of things about transparency and trust and collaboration and things that were probably pretty core to your culture. But talk to me about some of the distinctives and how you guys did or are, probably because you're still right in the thick of it, are merging some of those things that are so unique and distinct about your brands and your culture.
Well, I'll give a plug right now for coaching, because we literally hired a coach. So there you go, everybody. We hired a coach who really specializes in transition and change management.
Smart.
And we spent an entire weekend with about 80 of our leaders identifying and naming the losses, the loss of purpose, the loss of structure, the loss of identity. There's about 6 to 7 different ways we can experience loss. And so we named those, and then together, what's our part we're going to play in building this new thing together. So we had a very, very intentional weekend where there was a lot of tears. But really, how can we listen to one another and create space for grief for both sides? How can we create space for grief, which requires a certain level of safety? So I think that is where Liz and I, because we have these fundamentals that we both live our lives by, these fundamentals of, we believe in vulnerability and transparency and being able to create space for some of the feelings that most of us are uncomfortable with feeling, being able to listen and being able to receive from one another, being quick repairs. So when we do say something that offends the other, how can we quickly repair that and get to the other side? And I feel like it's those things that we were able to bring to these communities that we were merging together. So while there are these, certain distinct things, I think we really created space for us to, hey, we're going to lose some of those things now. Yeah. We're both going to lose some of those things because we're coming together in this new way. And I think that alone is what enabled the merge to happen, so that people could quit guarding their turf. Because I think that's what you really experience in a merge is turf guarding, and identity, and both, so
important for leaders to know and understand that it doesn't matter which side you're on, that applies. And I do feel like in some ways, the receiving side, the receiving culture, the impact can get underestimated, because it's like, well, more things are staying the same for you. And even like, I feel, for the leader, it's a whole different ballgame, and it's different, but it's still a significant loss, change, turf.
For sure.
Identity. And so it's so, I experience this in parenting. I definitely, if I'm going to err on one side or the other, I err on, let's move through these emotions. Come on, kids. Think about my instinct when my kid gets hurt. And especially if I look at them and I'm like, that was so small, is to be like, you're not hurt. You're okay. Get up. Let's move on. And or distract them or whatever. And I find that just, especially with one of my kids who's more sensitive, my learning process is that with him, the faster I try to move him through it, the longer we're going to sit in it. And the
Mhm.
moment where I just get down there with him and I'm like, I see you, you're hurting, you're upset. He just needs to be heard and he needs to be seen. And it's not about, it's like my judgment of how much that should hurt is so not useful. It's like,
Right.
if you're in pain, I'm going to meet you in that. I'm going to acknowledge it. And then together we're going to walk forward out of it. And so I think for us,
Love that.
this process, it was, and especially for Jess and I, who we're fast movers, we're fast processors. We think about the future, we think about opportunity, we don't dwell in hard things. So it was an exercise for both of us to slow the freak down and to
Yeah.
say,
Yep.
let's over index on creating the space for you. What is it for you, Julie, to what specific loss do you need to speak out loud and to be seen and to feel heard and to feel like we're tending to that? And then you, Katie, and it's a totally different loss for different people that they're holding on to. But if we don't create that space, it just festers and then they can't move on to the next thing because it feels like there's this thing that didn't get time to breathe and to live, and that we have to do that with the hard thing, which is so scary as a leader. So I think Jess and I have deep compassion on leaders who are walking through any sort of transition or shift, because it's a scary thing to go, hey, 80 people, tell us all the things that have been hard about what we're doing. That's like your defensiveness and your like desire to want to explain it away or to minimize it. It's hard to create that piece, but it's so good and it's so valuable and it's so worth it in the long run.
You guys, that's so good, because you're right. I think, and what I notice for a lot of leaders is by the time so projecting, making some assumptions about you guys, but by the time the two of you had decided this is what we're doing, you've already grieved all of your losses and you're ready to go. And then as leaders, we've got to do that step of taking the whole team through that. So you almost have to relive it twice, right?
Yes.
You're reliving it multiple times, but you've already made all of those key decisions and decided this is the way forward. And then you have to go back and do that with the whole team and give them space for that. And a lot of leaders don't want to give time or attention to that. And I love that you guys were so intentional, because it's so foundational for success, right? Help that entire team grieve. What are we losing? And I love, Liz, that you said it's both sides. It's both organizations. There's some loss and transition required, regardless of how are things functionally shifting. There's, especially on the culture side, there's things that are shifting or changing. And giving space for that, I think, is so powerful. Love.
Right, Jenny, about one of the analogies that I've used before is it's like, I've never before experienced something where it's like, I feel like once we got through the actual merge on the exec side, we had done the deal. I was like, I literally felt like I had finished a marathon of like, that was wild. It was emotional. It was strategic. It was time. It was money. It was everything.
Yeah.
And did it. And it's like, it's imagine getting to the end of a marathon and being like, we did it. We're here. And you like fall on the ground and you're just like, we made it. And then someone's like, hey, you've got a couple thousand people on the starting line. And you need to be there in 30 seconds and you need to run 26 miles with these people. And you're like, oh, okay. This is not like I'm back and I'm going to walk through every stage of this and relive every single emotion, because for you, it's the first time and I got to be in it with you. And it was like, I was not prepared for that. Like, I was definitely like, okay. It was a Groundhog Day of like, let's do it again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you just gave somebody else the gift, somebody who's in the early stages of a merger or major transition that's going, oh, I need to be prepared for that second.
A long
prepared. But, I think we
time.
both also sit on the side of like, it's so good. I mean, if it's the right thing, I'm not going to say every time it's the right thing, but a lot of times in life, the most beautiful things are the ones that require us to come to the very end of ourself. And I never would have changed it. And, it's also one of those things that you can get the advice beforehand and it's
until you do it.
Level. Yeah. Until you do it, until you still got to do it. You still got to walk the road. But it's definitely an example of like, I'm so glad we gave it our all. And now the other side of experiencing of truly what it is like to live out collaboration over competition. And as Jess said in the beginning, like it's more beautiful than we could have imagined.
So good. Okay, so what else has been challenging, or maybe what else did you underestimate in the process?
I think for me, kind of to Liz's point, and I'm someone, hospitality is a core value of mine. So I'm always thinking, how can I create a space of safety? I mean, one of my best friends just asked me to be her doula at her birth of her first child.
I'm so jealous.
We're going to be in India, Liz. So I had to say no. I had to say no.
Will she come with us?
Yeah, right. Right. Oh my gosh. But I said, this is the highest compliment anyone could pay me, to know that I can be a regulating presence for someone else, because I can so often feel dysregulated and anxious, but I really lean into creating safety and peace for other people. So I really over-indexed on how I could do that for Liz and for the community, and how we can create this new space, that I underestimated the impact it would have on the community that was sort of receiving all of these hundreds of new people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I could have done a better job of perhaps anticipating that, and probably had some listening sessions too, but they didn't anticipate it either. I think because that's a core value of mine. Our community is like that. Like, our community is all about create like hospitality. And that's just what our business model is.
Yeah.
We're constantly bringing in new people and creating this space of, mission and passion and authenticity. And so, but it really did shift, our culture. And I think that there is a level that's super normal when a community is coming to you, you're under the magnifying glass. I did not have their trust. I had to earn it.
Sure.
And I'm just not often in that position. By the time someone's saying, I'm signing up, to be on Jessica's team, like, I'm not earning their trust. I already have. And so there's a certain level of scrutiny that not just I needed, that I kind of had to experience, but also that our community had to experience as well. And I feel like I could have prepared them a little bit more. And what does that look like to kind of be in a position of needing to earn trust from other people? And, nobody asked to be in that position. So suddenly they're in a position where they're being scrutinized, and it doesn't feel very good. And I probably could still honestly be doing a better job of creating space for people now that we're talking about that.
Yeah, that's the just in the thick of it, right? But I love how you identified that earning trust piece, and that's not a position you've had to be in for some time, right? Of like, oh, okay, all of a sudden a bunch of people who are, I remember this when I transitioned a key role into a new organization. And I was number 2 in the organization, but I was the brand new one. And you assume that your resume and, the reasons why you got hired and chosen, or, all of these things would give you a measure of credibility. And it might have for the, you functionally can do the job. But I'd come from leading an organization for almost a decade, and I had just built in trust and respect and and then I went into a new place, and it was like zero. I'm starting from ground level, and I'm like, oh, wow, I underestimated this, of needing to earn that and build that trust with a new team was really powerful.
Yeah.
Well, for what it's worth, I mean, honestly, just going off of Jenni, what you just shared, I don't feel like that was my experience. And I feel like in this new space and new role, not that it wasn't at all, but I genuinely felt more of it was assumed, like I had some trust transferred. And I would credit a lot of that to you, Jess. So I know that there's room for growth, and you're saying I would have done this differently or that differently, but there were aspects of that hospitality and creating that culture that I very much so saw in the process.
Saw the benefit of.
Always room for growth, but I also think
I'll be your doula for your 4th child, Liz.
Do you want me to have a 4th child?
I do not. In fact, I do not. And I'm glad we're having that conversation right now.
Things you can only say to your business partner, not your employee.
Right. I know.
That's
I
right.
know.
Right?
That's
I
right.
guess you can say that to your business
I would
partner.
support you no matter what. But let's be real here.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about that. How did you clarify your roles? So you both were like the founders of your respective companies. How did you clarify your roles as you came together?
Yeah, that was also something that I feel like was a little bit easier than I thought it was going to be. I mean, I think for us, it was like there was a bit of a Venn diagram of like, one, there was going to be a significant area that we shared. So I feel like we didn't have to come in and say, it's not like a traditional setup where it was like, okay, you're going to cover we have to be as efficient as possible. So only you do this and only you do that. There's a fair amount of stuff that we share now
That
that
you
it's
share.
like, okay, this week you do it and next week I'm going to do it. And at this event, it's you. And on this trip, it's so I feel like we kind of have this Venn diagram where it's like, here's the things where we both drive value. And actually, luckily, because I don't know, it would have been very hard. I feel like if there wasn't space for us to overlap, because we do have quite a bit of overlap in our giftings and what brings us to life. And so I think the fact that we both saw that as an amazing benefit to have somebody who gets to share that versus like turfy, where it's like, but I'm really good at that. So we need to figure out who's the best at it and who's going to drive the most value.
And I think so much of this is because we've been doing this for like 12 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we're at the point where we see it as such a win. Whereas I think maybe more at the beginning of your career, you are kind of trying to build your own place in the world, your own place to stand. We know our place to stand. We know. And now we're like, let's do this together because this is really hard. Like let's share the burden together.
Yes.
And I think that is one reason that enabled that sort of quick trust and quick role sharing.
Yeah. How are you guys figuring that out in the day to day? So like maybe if you can share an example of where have you like unintentionally excluded each other, or how are you finding those, oh, we've got to make that decision together, oh, we can make that decision apart, like independently. Like what are some of those rhythms of working together that you guys are defining?
I honestly think where Jess and I both, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, I don't think our strongest suit is in like we have rhythms that we are super consistent with and disciplined on. What we are phenomenal at is fast, quick honesty and fast, quick repair.
That's how you do it.
Very quick to be like, hey, I saw that meeting was happening and I think I need to be in that room. And I'd like to talk through if there's a reason I wasn't invited to that call. Can I understand it more? Because I really feel like I should be there. And vice versa, like very quick to be like, it feels really redundant to have both of us on there. Are you feeling that way? Because I feel like I could bow out. I don't want to leave you hanging, but if you're good to take
Love that.
take it. So I feel like on both sides of I'm feeling excluded or I'm feeling like this is too much, too many cooks in the kitchen. We're just there's just a lot of like temp check.
There's a lot of generous assumption.
Good for you guys.
Yeah.
Where it's not like I'm not coming to the table with a story, and I don't feel like Jess is either, of like I'm writing the story about why you did this, and instead just like, hey, I'm not sure what's going on. So can you shed some more light? Because I'm just curious because here's my opinion on it. And I do feel like we're just pretty quick to be like, okay, like I don't need to, it doesn't need to be. I think about the amount of, and not just how it is more fun from a relational standpoint, not to constantly be making ungenerous assumptions about somebody. Like that leads to a lot of anxiety and stress and like, that's not fun. But also the business benefit of it, like the amount of time and energy that we're able to put towards the mission at hand, because we're not putting tons of emotional and psychological energy into like, what is she thinking? Why does she do that? Because I think we just trust each other that it's like, hey, if something comes up and it feels bad, I'm going to trust you to raise your hand. And when you do, I'm going to create the space to hear it. That releases an immense amount of emotional energy. Is it okay? I'm reading into this. What did that mean? Like, that's just bad business. You can't do the job if you're spending all of your time kind of spiraling in those areas,
So good. That's so good. What I hear from you guys is that the mission, the purpose like your why is so clear, and you guys share that, and then you are aligned on just some of these really core principles, fundamentals, values, whatever you want to call them, around this is how we behave. This is how we work together. We keep short accounts. We, give generous assumption, and just that high belief and trust is such a gift that you guys are giving each other. And I just am cheering you on as you keep moving through the next stages of this merger, because you guys are modeling for so many leaders what healthy, God-honoring leadership looks like, and what it means to really collaborate and not compete, and to just really lean into the best of each other. So thank you for that. It's such a gift, such a gift.
Thank you.
Well, friends, how can our listeners learn more about Noonday Collection in its newest season? Yes.
We just launched coffee, so that's super exciting.
Hey.
And already sold out. So we had to call our roaster, and they're roasting more for us as we speak. But we really are a one-stop ethical shop now with our merger with Sseko. We have every gift covered for you this holiday season, whether it's for your teen, whether it's for your executive team, whether it is for your mom. We have men's, we have home, we have gift, we have apparel, we have accessories, and all of it is using your purchasing power for good. So if you're going to spend money this season anyway, why don't you make it go for good in the world?
So is it Noonday Collection?
NoondayCollection.com. Yeah.
.com. I should have looked it up ahead of time, but I'll let you give it.
Okay. Shop away.
Follow us on all the socials. You can find us on Instagram at Noonday Collection, on Facebook. Jess and I, even just this month, every Friday, one of us is going live on Facebook to just doing some amazing holiday deals and Black Fridays. And so you can tune in and learn more about the collection and how to make gift giving a powerful, meaningful, and also really fun experience this holiday season.
That's so good. All right, ladies, I'm off to do my shopping. So thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for sharing your story and what you guys are learning as leaders through this process. Again, so inspiring and super grateful for you both.
Thank you, Jenni.